Bring out your Daves. Bring out your Daves. Bring out your Daves.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this month's episode of Bring Out Your Devs. I am your Crypt Keeper, Ronik, and I have a very special guest tonight. I'm very excited. Our lead writer, Gerhart, is here. As a writer, on my off time, I'm in awe and envy of you. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
So we're going to talk about the lore, and we're going to get into the world building. The first thing I usually like to do in these interviews, though, is sort of talk about your sort of background before Pantheon. In your case in particular, I'm curious sort of what got you into writing in general, and where did it start?
So, I have probably an unorthodox path here. I actually, when I was younger, probably through early college age, and even after that, I really wanted to write screenplays. Actually, what you've done, that was probably, if I would have had my pick of what I wanted my future to be, it would have been directing and screenwriting and a little bit of acting, and that was, I've written probably, I don't know, 10 of my own scripts that nobody but a couple of friends have seen and will ever see, because they're all like lost on some hard disks somewhere in a computer that I no longer have. But I started off really wanting to do that, and writing books and writing longer form prose and narratives like that actually didn't come along until I had gotten married and started having a family. And I think probably in line with what I started doing with my personal time, switching from watching as many films and kind of being steeped in that culture and that focus, and then changing relationships. I've oftentimes had kind of a creative friend that I've done things with, and when I was younger, I had a couple of friends that were interested in screenplays and screenwriting, and did that with me as well. And then that shifted as well personally to relationships come and they go and they fade, and found myself being drawn more to reading. I just spent more time reading, and really probably I've talked about this in different ways before, that what really pushed me into thinking more along the lines of world building was falling back in love with history. I think if I was to give anybody any advice, not that I'm in a position to do so, but if you want to create worlds that fit in some way and that have a sense of themselves and an expectation of existence, I would always recommend study something from our own world. And the more that you learn kind of the unpredictable but still plotted way that human history develops, you can kind of understand what it takes to create a fictional world. And so that's really what led me to start thinking along the lines of longer form world building in a traditional fictionalized sense, was nonfiction. And so I had started to write my own series. One was going to be pure fantasy, and was based around primarily a set of characters that were probably going to each have their own smaller book, and was going to explore the world from their perspectives and vantages. And then eventually build that out, and didn't have all this figured out yet, and still don't. How I wanted those characters in the world to eventually interface with larger set pieces within the world and kind of be caught up in everything else. And you have these introductions to the characters, and maybe you've already known them, maybe down the road as the world developed more, as the kind of saga developed more, have more introductions to more characters that were a little bit more isolated and stuff like that. But so I started off doing that and realized I had no idea what I was doing, and that it was completely overwhelming. And so shifted to kind of a science fantasy, space fantasy trilogy that I was going to do that was more focused on a family and their yeah, I'm not going to go through all this stuff. Anyway, that was where I was at, was kind of in between those two worlds.
Did you steal anything from some of your novels and bring it into Pantheon at all?
No, not. I don't think so. I mean, everything influences everything, and so there's probably ways that certain things have leaked in. But no, I try to compartmentalize projects and stuff like that, and keep them to themselves. But what did happen, honestly, is I talked to CP about a character in that fantasy world. His name was Praetus, and he's this very old giant speaking bear, and he's in the last stage of his life, and he rules over this area called Broken Wood. And one of the characters that one of the smaller books would have been about has to encounter him, and CP really liked the idea, and we talked several times about it, and he would ask me about the story, how's it coming, and for some reason he really liked Praetus. And he and then it was probably like a month or two later, he was like, oh, by the way, I'm working on this game. And I was like, oh, okay. He's like, I think you should think about applying for the lore team. And I shut him down, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 times, because I had no thoughts of video games at that point in time. I wasn't playing really much of anything. And it wasn't that I looked down on it. It was not where my head's at. I'm like, I want to write my books. Thanks. And eventually he persuaded me, as he is one of the most persuasive people I know. He persuaded me and talked about how great it was and how exciting it was. And again, like, I'm one of the few people that I knew who Brad McQuaid was, but if you said his name, I didn't have like an enchantment immediately cast on me, because I just didn't have that relationship with EQ. And I actually had to go to a couple other friends and was like, Brad McQuaid's like the guy that did that MMO, right? And they're like, yes. What do you mean? Like, of course. Yeah. And I'd be like, okay, cool. Calm down. And then came back to CP and was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. What do I need to do? And sent an email in to Brad. Actually, what I sent in was some excerpts from that fantasy series. I forget, this is all coming back to me now. So I sent some of that in to Brad and the person who was running the lore team at that point in time. And
this is Valen, right? Tony Garcia?
No, Tony was not on the team at that point.
Okay.
I think most of them had left. They left that year, but we never overlapped. Was
it the fuzzy troll lady?
It was the fuzzy troll lady.
Okay, we don't. That's the dark period of Pantheon. We don't like to talk about.
Yes.
But
Yes,
you hit so many topics there.
Let me break and you
let me get in. But we're gonna circle back on some of the other stuff that you talk about. But what you're talking about right now is an interesting topic and one I wanted to talk about, which was you basically took over the lore from someone else. How at that point, first of all, what was that experience like, and how did you decide what to keep that was there previously and what to toss?
So a lot of that was done in juxtaposition with CP. We spent like hours in the studio area because he came on as the wouldn't call him music lead maybe, but maybe composer. He was doing the music, which I think most people are familiar with now, and he was doing an amazing stuff there. In fact, that was part of what convinced me too, was the tracks that he was already working on. I love that.
That stuff's still up in SoundCloud.
Exactly right.
So
yeah.
good.
If you haven't listened to it,
too.
yeah, I'm sure it is. If you haven't avail yourself of it, please go listen to it. It's fantastic. So that immediately was exciting to me. But so I came on and was basically just kind of an assistant. Actually, the first thing I was given was someone else had decided to remove the original team had the djinn, like a genie type race, and that had decision before I came on had been decided to not have that race anymore. And then I think the Revenant were being switched out. The Revenant were originally a race, and then there were trolls. And so there were those. There was a time already when I was coming on that a lot of the original stuff was in flux, and I was given a race to create that was going to be based on elements. That was basically the only direction, and so I created the Archai out of it. CP actually, guys, I can see the chat.
Don't distract him, guys. The chat is distracting Jan. Can you see this?
I've been watching you the whole time.
Yeah, especially you, Savanya. We can see you.
Yes, especially you, Savanya. That was everything else. I'm like, I can subtly just kind of keep an eye on it. But when that one comes through, I mean, by all means, make fun of me all you want. I can promise you, I will make fun of myself better than you can make fun of me, though. So CP actually took the dwarves, and that's why at different times I've definitely deferred to what he wants, because he's really the heart of that race. He'll always be the heart and soul of that race. And so so I kind of got a taste of, to answer your question and not go completely far afield, I had a taste of what making something or remaking was almost immediately. Like, we had one or two calls, and then it was, hey, I need you to make a race. And honestly, it was, I'm just gonna, in the spirit of Steve being completely transparent, at that point in time, it was like, what do you want to do? Okay, that sounds good. There was not a lot of direction there, and I think that's part of what led to really a full transition that happened over the coming months, where CP was actually first made, I think, the lore lead, and then I was associate, and then that moved eventually to me being the lead and the lead writer. So at that point, there was a bigger conversation with Brad about what was important to him to keep, because I was thinking about this today. I didn't have a proper level really of respect for what had come before. I think I can freely admit that. And I was ready to take a blowtorch to everything and not start completely from ground zero, because the game already had an identity, especially amongst the community that was already following it. But it didn't have that to me. And so Brad was great about giving me a whole lot of space to operate in, but then also identified some core pillars that he wanted to stay. Like War Wizards didn't mean anything to me. Well, Brad really wanted War Wizards to be in the game and have a pivotal role in the game. he wasn't as specific about how, but he wanted them to be part of the history, and that name specifically to be there. And now, I mean, again, Steve talked about it some, but I understand so much more about why that was important. And so things like that wanted to stay. Obviously, the game's name was staying Pantheon, so the relationship with the deities was important to get those right and make sure every race had a good representation of a pantheon. And there were a few other things, but those were kind of some of the main ones. That I kept.
I was working with the team during the Kickstarter, and then when the Kickstarter ended, I kind of left for a bit. And then when I came back, I guess it must have been 2017, May of 2017, I think. And by that time, I think you were here. I know CP was definitely here. And the game, and it was interesting to watch the evolution of the game and sort of what had changed and what had stayed. And it wasn't, obviously the game's called Pantheon and the relationship to the Pantheons stayed, but like you said, everything else was sort of felt new. I'm glad I missed the fuzzy troll stuff. I'm sure you kind of just caught the tail end of it. I want to kind of, we can probably talk about that all day, but so cool to, I will say this, like, I feel like right from the get-go, both Brad and CP have been very good about letting people do what they do best. And I'm glad to hear that both of them kind of let you do what you do best, because the game is where it is lore-wise because of that quality. So that's so great. So I want to circle back a little bit before we kind of move on about Pantheon stuff. You mentioned that you like nonfiction and stuff. As far as researching for the game goes, is there what sort of research do you do when you're building a world like Terminus?
So it depends what I'm working on. There's like I probably read more from other authors now that are specifically either in the genre or adjacent to the genre. I've been reading a lot of sci-fi lately, and I'm not sure why. That's just where my imagination's been drawn to. And there's just so much good content there. But for me, honestly, it really is reading historical accounts or refamiliarizing myself specifically with the history of Rome, the history of Greece. Depends again what I'm working on. Like for Thronefast, if I'm developing something there's just this a different kind of regality that ancient Rome had, or Byzantium, that or even some of the Chinese dynasties, that I feel like speaks to, well, it helps me at least expand my mind on what power looks like, because it's not, for some of the greatest powers, it's not just your military strength, it's your economic strength, it's your infrastructure, it's so many other things. And so I like to familiarize myself with the rising and falling of empires when I'm operating in or thinking about or creating something of a narrative form that has the same arc. And so if Thronefast, for instance, or some of the ancient cultures in Terminus, I don't just want to present them from the perspective of looking from the present back, but also knowing what they were like in their heyday or in the beginning of their development as a culture. And so for me, it really is going back to historical narratives that are really helpful. And then if it's prose, which I hope I've developed on that front as much as anything over the past 6 years, that is really just listening and reading good authors and trying to find the most efficient way to be communicative and clear with what we're trying to say and put on paper for people. So Yeah, it's kind of weird. Maybe how I research at least, but it's a lot of that, and then just trying to remember what inspires me, what interests me, and what I think would be a good spark of imagination. Like for instance, the most recent piece we put out, last month, where Minus read everything with the Aradola and everything. I just happened to be at the beach that week and already had stuff written about them and who they were, but really felt like their relationship to the sea is what was really clear to me. And so, sometimes it's not reading anything or listening to anything; it's just looking outside. So yeah, those would all be things that feed into research, and then also just pulling from life experiences as well.
I think we need like a JN recommends section of the book of authors. Do you like, so when we look back at the ages of that Terminus has gone through, like in the, oh god, I'm gonna butcher this, the DC War, as I say that right?
Deicide.
Damn it!
Yeah,
I was so close.
You were so close. You really were so close.
This was one of my questions for later. Scale of 1 to 10. How much does it annoy you when Minus or I mispronounce something on stream?
Honestly, like a 3.
Okay.
I've mispronounced stuff. I mispronounced stuff. I mean, there's so much out there that I'll look at something that I haven't thought about for 6 months, and I'm like, okay, I know how to say it. Like to myself, I know how to say that. I know exactly how to say that, and then I'll just be like, wait a minute, maybe I don't know how to say that. It's just like you just trip yourself up. So no, I don't. Plus, CP and other people prepped me for like the Kanos, and all these other things that I have a lot of grace for differing pronunciations.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's like a colloquialism, I'm giving you the New York version of how to say it.
Exactly right.
But that actually brings up another good question. Like when you're thinking about names of places, or characters in the thing, where does that come from? Is that just all off the top of your head, or is there, like, obviously with some of it you've created lore and a backstory to it, and the way that a name is pronounced is within the history of the race or something? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so some of it's born out of the naming convention that the race has or the faction has. And I mean, there's some are really hard rules, like dragons have very specific rules that determine their name. That's based on a couple different criteria. So dragons I'd say like are, have the hard and fast rule set. And then humans, there could be influences, but, humans are more apt to go by nicknames and have, short family histories and lineages that maybe influence certain things, but also have more flexibility and a lot more room and freedom. And so you've got a pretty wide berth there, and then there's everything in between. And so it just kind of depends on who I'm writing, and then what that associated faction requires. So that kind of just depends on who it is and what's going on there. And then places, again, I'm trying to make things easier to read and digest. I don't know if it's still the case, but Fires of Heaven's Pantheon thread had like 10 or 15 apostrophes in it for a long time, because they it's not so subtle mockery of the fact that we had a lot of apostrophes in our my original characters, the dragons specifically. And so there's, I've learned that it's good to make most things clear. I mean, Tolkien had his Minas Tiriths, but he also had Mount Doom, and so it's good to make things clear on the whole, and then pick your battles when you want something a little bit more exotic.
For sure. Can talk to me about the process when you're building like a POI in game, because essentially like it doesn't just start with you; it kind of ends with you too. You're kind of involved the entire way. So like, let's just pick it. It doesn't have to be your favorite because we know you can't figure that one out.
I don't have favorite children. Yeah.
Let's talk about a place and kind of run us through the process of how that came to be and what was involved as far as getting it in game and involving the other developers as well.
Mm-hmm. So we can talk about Wild's End, and there's enough there that we've talked about publicly that I think would have connection points with people. But so
they also like spoilers, by the way, in case you hadn't noticed. So yeah, they might like some beans. By the way, chat, if you guys want to ask some questions for JN for later in the thing, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll check them out later and we'll get them answered. But yes, we can, if you want to give a little bit here, I'm sure they would appreciate it.
Yes. So I'll just talk, and I'll probably like someone walking around holding too many beans. I'll probably just have some beans fall out of my hands.
There you go.
Because that's what basically devs just walk around all day long with like their shirt full of beans, and they just fall out.
And Ben Dean just sort of follows us around, picking up after us. So.
Yeah. Well, and he's got his switch that if you drop too many beans in a row, he just kind of like whips real fast. And yeah, but then he also picks up the beans and then claims to have the most beans himself because he's picking up all the ones we drop. Okay, so whatever the heck that means. So Wild's End, it's obviously a zone, a collection of POIs. Within it, though, you've got several POIs that when we went back to the zone to develop it further, there was, well, I felt before anybody told me, nobody actually told me this. It's funny when you realize something that you think is critical, it sounds like someone's voice even though it isn't. So nobody said to me, "Hey dude, there's not enough stuff here." But I felt that it was a little bit barren and sparse. And so I added to or embellished a few POIs. And so the giant presence that we had in the zone as far as ruins and structures was actually pretty minimal originally. It was just going to be like gate, some gate architecture. So the gate is a POI that is up high in Wild's End, and that idea has been there since the first what we used to call zone summaries that I did. So way back, I would write stuff in a prose form that was horrible for everyone who came after me, because why does a world builder or a artist need like 3 paragraphs of description? This sharp learning curve here. But so I would do that, and eventually over time we've gotten that to where it's just way more just about the brute information. And so the gate was there from the beginning though, and so it has routes that go in this weird way, kind of before but also after the giant presence. And it was part of a group that's not there anymore, but a giant came in, leader named Amicus, and had a profound influence on the architecture there, and bent it towards the overall giant look and feel, in part because he was just so large, and in part because he had other aims beyond this particular group, and reasons why I did that. So anyway, but I built that out and decided to have more of the giant presence in the valley of Wild's End. So I, edited the documentation, changed all that, talked with CP about it. But then like Tim comes in, our world builder, and begins to put more things. So Gerhart Pullen had done concept art for the architecture already. Tim models based off that, builds accordingly, but then he also started putting more pieces around Wild's End, and just has developed this beautiful expanse of giant presence. Again, only the buildings, because they're not there anymore physically. And so he took what I had done and what Gerhart had done, and then went beyond that. And that's pretty common. And so when there's a development like that in the world, then it kind of does fall back on me to either justify it or explain it a little bit more. This is pretty light. It's pretty minor. He didn't create a whole new like POI set that wasn't there. But in this case, it does kind of ping pong back. And so I start with the idea of the gate. Then Gerhart does concept work that influences also what I'm thinking, as we have conversations and develop that. Ping pongs back to me. Then that artwork goes to Tim. Tim develops out and builds out more. And then that comes again back to me. And there's CP, there's Adam, there's other people influencing this too. But it just begins to grow into something that is a much more comprehensive finish, or has a much more comprehensive end point than just what was in my brain, because this is a game world. This is not a literature world, and so all of the other things need to fit into place. So what becomes a dungeon, or what becomes just an encounter area, what becomes a mining area, or and obviously these things have overlapping points, but yeah, so that's an example of one. I would say that's just that, that developed back and forth. The Daedrum Ascent is another one in Wild's End that was a late addition, and that was just I had the loose idea of what Daedrum are, because they're going to be a global faction that has many different individual groups. That the Daedrum are. This is where I never know what to say, and I can never remember all that's been said. They have relationship with dragons, and yeah, thanks, Desrin. No pressure at all. They have relationship with dragons, and have a particular place in the world. And then this group has been in Wild's End for a very long time. Like they had an encounter with the Revenant, and they're still there. So read from that what you will. And so there's, but the Daedrum were kind of this like one of many things that you're just kind of like tucked away, had no place really until this point where I was like, man, I need to develop them further. This is a perfect place for them. And I don't usually ask for permission. I just make it and then say, yeah, guys, this has been here the whole time. And and then Gerhart does concept art on it. Tim makes it, and it's in the game. And
that's pretty great.
Yeah, it's there's obviously more to it than that, and there are some times where there you can put way too much content or way too many POIs in a limited area. And so I think over time that initial feeling I had that Wilds End just didn't have enough stuff has borne true. And if that wasn't true, it's too late now because it's in the game.
Has there ever been anything where like you're like, I cannot believe they allowed me to put that in the game? Or like you're just shocked, like you just made this up and you're like, yep, that's in the game now.
Oh, I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is, but nothing comes. I'll think about that. There's nothing that comes to mind immediately. There's stuff that has personal meaning to me that I'll probably never talk about publicly. That to me gives me a similar feeling of like I kind of can't believe I was able to just put that in. And that's not in a like.
There's like ex-girlfriends' corpses like lying around the ground and stuff.
Yeah, I've got names. If you knew my dating history and how short and small it was until I met my wife, no, there's no ex-girlfriends. But yeah, something. I mean, not anything like that's extremely violent like that. But yeah, there's just stuff.
And this is why I'm not the lead writer here in this game.
Well, but we do want to get your influence more and more in the world. Yeah. But now I know what you're gonna do with it. So anyway,
expect lots of death, I guess.
Yeah. But little things like that are what stand out to me. I mean, in general, I still feel like I can't believe I'm able to do this. That is the overwhelming feeling that I've had from day one, and still have to this day. That I can't believe that my first position in the industry, led to this. That's unbelievably fortunate and blessed and privileged. So that part honestly probably keeps me from doing too many things that I think are silly and ridiculous, or just, personally satisfying.
That's the difference between us. So we've talked about Pantheons for a bunch of the races. We haven't talked about all of them. Are there any stories you want to maybe talk about of something that's coming up, or one of the Pantheons that you're excited about that we haven't talked about yet? Asking all the hard questions here.
Yeah, please. See, when Kilson had these, I had my nice, comfy, cozy list of questions ahead of time that I could make sure that I had great, compelling answers to. And all these on the fly are way more dangerous. So kudos to you.
That's how I roll. That's how they like it, I do it for the fans.
Yes, you are the link between the community and the dev team. Let me think for just 1 second. I don't know which ones we've actually. This is where again I'm just because I'm.
So we definitely. All right, so I can name a few. We definitely have talked about most of the human ones.
Yes.
We've talked about a few of the elven ones.
Yes.
And I feel like maybe we haven't talked about any of the gnome ones.
The gnome pantheon is I would say similarly disembodied as they are. Okay. And so the gnome pantheon is one that I'm excited to explore, but it is not as like bold or in your face, and it's more based almost on well, to get into gnomes a little bit, and gnomes run the risk of kind of losing themselves internally as much as externally. And so they're not just like these super intelligent, unsocialized robots. They are almost unsure and uncertain at times on how to interact with the rest of the world because of how they are. And so there's a almost cultural imperative to stay connected because they can lose themselves in isolation. And so their deity reflects that. Their deities reflect that. where there's different things more internally that pull on them into different directions, and their deities are more alignments, kind of are parts of that sphere that are pulling them in different directions. And so it's not the personified classic like Greek deity. They don't really even, they have names, but the naming of them and the worship of them is different. It's not as clear as like you're going to Athena's temple. It's almost more like sadness versus determination, and these internal forces that can compel them and pull them in different directions. And I don't think we've talked about that at all. I don't think we've mentioned anything about the Gnome pantheon or deity structure at all.
We haven't. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, you good. This is great.
We should soon. We should.
Yeah, I mean, all this stuff's written. It's been written for a long time.
I've seen the document. I've seen it. It exists.
It exists.
Yeah, that's cool. I think there's a lot of sort of mystery around them, and I think in a good way. You don't want to reveal too much, but the little beans help for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go a different direction now. We've talked about the tenets of the game itself being difference makers. From a world building and lore perspective, what do you think is going to make Pantheon stand out in a crowded sort of fantasy space?
Mm-hmm. Oh man, that is a huge question.
I told you this was not going to be easy. I let you off easy on the stream because you made me, but I gave, and you had like 2 extra months here.
Yeah, yes, yeah, and I've done nothing with it. Clearly, all of my notes and all of my work has been in vain.
That is not what I said, Des. I did not say why is your lore much better than everyone else's. Okay, so this kind of taps on, I've wanted to hear from the community what are things we can actually do better with our lore and with our story, and whether that's the dispensation of information, the sharing of content. And I know anytime you ask a group of people for their opinion, there's always a danger that you're going to never be able to shut off that spigot. But I genuinely would like to know, so feel free to drop in the comments. Like and subscribe and let us know what things would be of value to you all, because that matters a lot, and it's part of my answer. I would like, so way back, even when I wanted to write screenplays, what I wanted to have said of them is that they kept people up at night, but in a good way. Kind of the opposite of maybe the way fear keeps you up at night. Unless it's a good fear. There are fears that are good to have, that keep you from harm. But I've always wanted to write stories that people just kept thinking about and kept kind of discussing either with themselves or with their friends. I guess I should say this. I don't look at or read any fan fiction at all. Really, because I just don't want to. I want to influence you.
Yes, yeah. I want to respect the creative work of other people, and I want, if something that's in there shows up in our world, to have the purely clean conscience, knowing that it was just a coincidence. Or whatever, the way that creativity germinates, and you'll have people make the same book, a similar book will come out within 6 months of each other, and the authors didn't know each other, and they just happen to write a similar thing. I just want to have that clear conscience, but I love that it exists. I love that the world is something that already, with as little as is out there, and that we've shared, that people want to write stories in it and create things in it and of it. That, man, that is exciting to me. And so that, in a way, is I would hope that our world isn't so thin that it needs that in order for people to believe in it. Rather, the opposite be the case, that the world is alive enough that they just look anywhere, they like pull up any corner of the rug or a rock, and there's life there that they feel like they're invested in, and they can create their own narratives and stories out of that. And so that's, I wouldn't say like, oh, my goal is to have great fan fiction around our world, but I would want it to be so vibrant and so alive, and also carries your belief. I guess if I was to distill it down to one thing, truth and effect are two things that I always want to be present in whatever I do, like some measure of truth in it, and then it to have an effect on you every time. But kind of the child of those two things are belief, and I want our world to always value the time and belief investment that people make in it, to where you can't be perfect from like a consistency and inerrancy standpoint, no matter how good you do. I mean, history is filled with narratives and counter narratives and unreliable narrators and all this stuff. Like, it's impossible to be perfect, but I want what we do, especially when we go to the effort of establishing some kind of rule set, for that to continue and be consistent enough that you're not, reading something one day and you're like, what the heck? A gnome would never do X, Y, and Z. I want it to be authentic and reward the time you give us, and the belief that you give us. And so, those are all pillars for me, is things that are carrying that expectation of existence, which just means like, there's something that came before this, there's something that's coming after this, even if we don't know what it is yet and we don't articulate it, like, we know it's there. And it just makes it so much easier to believe. And readers, the audience, is kind of trained, especially now with how many stories are out there just in general. You can tell, you can smell when something's like, the dev team or the author or whatever just did something that wasn't earned, or was a big change that didn't have the proper build up there. So I just want to try to reward that as often as possible, because we're going to make mistakes, we're going to do things that we think are right, that the community doesn't, but as often as possible I want to reward that interest and investment. So
great answer. I personally think that, and this is not being a developer, aside, I just think your voice is very original, and I think you come through in the lore and the world itself, and I think that you just have an original take on a lot of sort of things that could be very tropey. So I personally think that's going to be the difference maker. But anyway,
thanks,
I
man.
answered my own question, as I tend to do sometimes.
If you could just tell me your answer ahead of time next time, like just type it or send it to me, and then I'll just read it, and then I won't feel lost, and you'll feel heard.
Side note, anytime you want to come into the VIP channel and have an open discussion with them, like you talked about, we can totally arrange that, where you can come in and like get their thoughts on these topics you talked about.
Well, they're putting in thoughts here that I am not going to just go silent for 5 minutes and read them all right now, but I will read all of these, and I genuinely appreciate your all's thoughts and feedbacks. I mean, you're kind of the core of the core, and so what you say and the perspective that you all have is truly invaluable. So, I think our lore has gotten weirdly gotten shielded from a lot of criticism, and then also gotten a lot of criticism, and then this perspective here is really valuable. So, yeah, I greatly appreciate what you guys are saying in here. I'm sorry, I'm doing what I said I wouldn't do. I'm reading stuff as I'm talking.
Well, that's good because we actually have some asked questions from the community. So you get ready, you can ask some of these. So you can engage with the community, and you don't have to read. I will read to you.
Okay.
So Morak was wondering, is if every POI is going to have some sort of lore implication. And are there plans to change up dialogue for looping quest lines? So it's a two-part question. Let's start with the first one. Is every POI going to have some sort of lore implication?
I would say technically yes, but of varying degrees, and so if you come upon an expansive set of ruins, it just may not have a lot there. For a keeper, there may be things to figure out, but not every single POI will have the same depth of lore, and so it just kind of will vary, depending on what it is. Yeah.
And then the second part of his question was, are there plans to change up dialogue for looping quest lines? Which
that would be case by case as well. I would say, like, it just depends on, with the node based system that we have right now in Pulse, it's shockingly easy to do something like that, and to have flags and presets and all kinds of variables that feed into any number of outcomes and options. It's what we need for the perception system to actually be a thing and not just be a novelty. So it's perfect for that. But when we were first discussing it and Rob was developing it, I told CP, like, this can feel like, those old classic pictures or video of the women at a switchboard, where you've got so many potential inputs and outputs that it's, you're gonna, like, I was like, our designers and writers are going to be like those poor women who are just on a headset plugging in and unplugging and plugging in and unplugging, because there's so many options. You're like, work is actually editing down, and so limiting the amount of variability that you have. Because I'm not kidding, like, we could have one conversation that would lead to the equivalent of, to be ridiculous, like, some RPGs, conversation paths. Like, you could just through one thing build and build and build and build and build, and then you could have every variable from your gear to your faction to your race to your class to events, things that you've done up to this point, who you walked by in a conversation you overheard, like what's equipped, what's unequipped. Like, there's so many different flags that we can use, that the work is actually in make it worth the time investment for the team, but then also for the player as well. So yeah, there'll be things that, again, case by case basis, there'll be stuff that you'll come to and you'll like, man, I wish this was different, and we understand that. But then there'll be other things where you'll hopefully play it 3 or 4 times with different characters and different tunes, and still get a different outcome.
Great. Thorn Deep wants to know, I would love to get more info about the Scar. What is their social structure like? And can you describe what a typical day for a Scar would be like? So he's really into the Scar.
He's really into the Scar. I love it. I don't know that I'm not big into, like, the personalized name, like what are followers of Pantheon called? I don't know. I'm not big into having, like, Trekkies, things like that. But I love that people love the Scar, and they're
Pantheons, I think, was where we settled.
Pantheons. Okay.
Pantheons.
Pantheonians. I love that, Fuzzy. Pantheonians is going to be number one in my heart. Um, the Scar are so the Scar. If we're talking about pantheons too, the Scar have the 9 God and the 9 hates, and so they have a a it's almost an external version of what the gnomes have, but it's very different too, because it is very personified. And so you have the 9 God, and then you have the 9 hates that the Scar kind of move in between all of these things. And so life of a Scar is unfortunately a lot of torment internally, and then almost making the external world a relief, as inhospitable as it is. And so it's survival. It's trying to find peace internally and externally, as chaotic and as rabid and as nuts as they are. I don't know if we've said this or not, but the signature character for the Scar is actually a monk. And he's just a very different Scar. Like, he's one that you would not think could exist, but as you learn more about the 9 God and the 9 hates, it would make sense there if you had full knowledge on that, and then hopefully as we reveal more things. So Scargol is a horrible place. It's one of the worst places to exist in Terminus. I would say it's not quite like 40k horrible, but it's pretty bad. And if you're just kind of a resident there, your life expectancy is pretty short, and there's not going to be a loving family for you. Scar don't really operate within family dynamics. It's really just kind of everybody's an orphan, with a brutal hierarchy and structure of power there. And then out in the world, everybody's suspicious of you. Nobody likes you, but you're okay with that because you don't have some of the same internal mechanisms that everybody else has to feel things like shame and insecurity and stuff like that. But I don't want to at all portray them like they're animals. They're not. They're very much not. They're just kind of under the weight of a curse still, and have a very twisted view of the world.
Are we getting back to these signature characters at some point?
Minus and I have talked about it, and the answer is yes. I mean, Lord willing, maybe if one day CP comes to me and asks me a question, then I won't finish them. It'll be on you to finish them. But no, that's the idea for sure.
Yeah, I'd love to get back, because the original plan obviously was we had a bunch, and we do. We have a bunch.
Yeah. So the bait featured, I guess, 3 signature characters. Dothane is one of them. He's the dwarven one. And I mean, you'll notice kind of with each of them, they're kind of just not what you would expect with that race necessarily. They're all supposed to be twists or developments on the race. And part of it for me is trying to look at what could players do, like how could they imagine themselves within their race and still feel like they're authentic. So yeah, that's I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah. So
we were talking about getting back to the signature characters.
Yes, I started thinking about Dothane, and then the bait, and then the rest of the thing is, and I got lost in my head.
This is you're great at that. I mean, I just think from an art point of view, like as far as some of the stuff that we've done, like some of my favorite, like seeing these characters sort of, and the race is fully rendered to their sort of maximum like final form or whatever. I don't know what you want to say, but that's been some of my favorite stuff. But we'll circle back on that at another time. Iskar, this is a good question. What all came with the collisions from each race? Were sections of the planet or other manner of flora fauna transported with the player races, or was it strictly the members of the race? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And if we want to get into like the contentious stuff, there's stuff I can't answer. There's so much I can't say. But with this, this is probably one of the areas where there was the most heat, because internally, and I just mean like what some people wanted / expected, and what I felt like was necessary to justify a world actually existing were two different things. And so the answer I'll say is that it's more than just the individual races, like the actual populations. It wasn't the entire population necessarily. And then there's landmass, there's flora, there's fauna, there's
well, he has a follow-up, which is a good question too.
What's his follow-up?
I could just tell in your voice how you really wanted to answer this one. He wanted to know if there's examples of foes or former foe turn ally in this like kind of strange new world thing. Like they were, did anything like that come along?
I mean, there's one in particular that I can think of for sure. Yeah, there's definitely at least one. I mean, there's more than one, but there's one that comes immediately to mind.
All right, that's what we're going to get from that right now.
Yes.
Basgrim wants to know, it is said that Kazas forged the dwarves by merging stone from the heart of the cold dark peak with a shard of the ice of, oh god,
Ryfel.
Yes, Ryfel Kazas, thank you, giving their skin a blue tint. But it's also said that he blessed them with much of his own character. Does that mean that Kazas also had bluish skin?
So, no. Character. Well, I mean, look back at the phrase in Christianity of that humans are made in the image of God, and there's a lot you could take from that I think would be inaccurate. Obviously, Christian deity is immortal, omniscient, omnipresent, and none of those things apply to mortals and human beings. But then there are aspects of his character, like an immortal soul, and then a whole bunch of other things like desire for family, love, all of these things that are emblematic of his character. And so I would say that's more what we're talking about with Kazas giving the dwarves his character. It's more of an internal image of him than an external appearance of him.
Right on. All right. Well, here you go. Therek's got a bunch of questions for you, obviously.
Oh, Therek? Who's this?
Yeah. I feel like Therek is like your sort of unofficial mentee. We'll just leave it at that.
I think Therek knows more. Anyway, I think highly of Therek. We'll just say that.
You're going to say
think
Therek
he's more than just
knows more than anybody else but you, or including you?
No, I was just going to say I think Therek's honestly. You want to know what this is? You guys can tell Therek this. Is this going to go public? Is this going to be released out, or is this one only going to be internal? Do you know?
I don't know. That's above my pay grade. If it was up to me, they'd all be released at some point.
Okay. Well, maybe this is what Ben will make Ben say. No, we're not going to go public with it. But this is a good thing. It sounds like it was him terrible now. Oh my gosh, what a setup. I remember very early on, listening to, I don't know if it was Pantheon Plus. I don't know if it was probably Voices of Terminus. I think it was probably Voices of Terminus. So VOT forever ago. Listening to one of their shows, and Theric called in, or it's not actually a call-in show, but he came on and he said, I think their lead writer, or the guy that got doing the lore, is good. I think he's really doing something. And I did not share that belief. And that meant so much to me. Like, I mean, it's like so much to me that somebody out there who I could tell had an appreciation for fantasy, for lore, and all this stuff, and I felt like I was just trying really hard, probably trying too hard, but did not really necessarily know if what I was doing was good at all. And I remember that. I remember him saying that, and I was like, dude, that makes me feel so like at least I've got that guy. And and then that guy became Theric, or who already was, but I didn't know who he was at the time. And so that I don't think Theric is like he's never fanboying. He's never like just everything we would do. I don't feel like he would just automatically love. I feel like he has a really good smell test, and so he's a big deal to me. So I really appreciate his influence outside of our dev team, obviously with the community, and really spearheading and leading a lot of the lore side of things, and the appreciation and the consolidation. And every time him and Des talk about the lore, it always means a lot to me. So that's stumbling through that, but I felt like I really needed to get that out there. And you all have a really special person in him, and everybody should know that and appreciate him. So what was the actual question?
Well, I hadn't even gotten to the questions yet, so
okay. Let's move on.
Theric will appreciate this. All right, so he's got a couple questions,
okay.
And so we're gonna go. So we're a little over now, but I want to keep going because there's a couple questions. Care. All right, you're good. All right.
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. All right. Can you tell us more about Lady Winleon?
So
did I get that name? Did I get it right?
You did a great job. You did a really great job.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks.
Yeah. So Winleon is from a she's from a noble family, so interesting thing with her. So she is basically in her own way caught between two worlds, but more has more agency than you might expect. So she what have we said publicly? Okay, so she is married to the leader of the Black Rose, and she is also doing her own thing. So some of what the Black Rose have done and the way that group has grown and decisions that have been made with what's important to them did not necessarily sit well with her. And so she's capable in her own right and has started doing some things on her own. And so there's tension in the House of Black Rose between her and her spouse. So she's just very much her own person right now, but also is maybe not totally pleased with how everything is. I don't think she wants to kind of live in the state she's in forever, but yeah, she's capable of doing what she wants there. And so you have I'm seeing a question right now. Is she current or the lore of the past? She is current.
And she'll be in game, right?
Yes. She will absolutely be in game.
Sorry, was I not supposed to say that?
No, that's fine. That's fine. It's totally fine.
CP's out today, so it's fine.
Yeah. No, I don't think that's it. Okay, so that shouldn't be like
Yeah, I don't think so.
no, it's totally fine. I mean, okay, I can't say like she's going to be in game at launch. You're going to like start a character in Throne Fast, and then there's Win Leon right there to meet you. But she is in the current timeline of the game at launch, and so yeah, and so she's doing her thing, and then Amana Karos, leader of the Black Rose, her husband is I wouldn't say he's doing his own thing. I mean, his reasons for where he's taking the Black Rose are to an end that absolutely includes her. I mean, he's the one that's more tormented as far as she goes than he is. So he's kind of got this relationship to the rest of the world where he's just one of the most intimidating characters in against Throne Fast, antagonists to Throne Fast, specifically to nobility, but he kind of can't control his own house there because of decisions he'd made. So
totally can relate. So what prevented Seville, just kidding, Manor from being burned to the ground? Was there some sort of divine intervention? There's another Theric question. I'm gonna give Theric I'm gonna let you answer all three of his questions.
Okay.
So this is 2.
Yeah, so that is a little bit of myth making in general, just kind of giving the story some like local legend. I wanted that story to sound like how someone who was not there that night would tell it. So that the story of Seville Manor includes the night, the rain wouldn't fall to the ground. But the kind of myth in there, or the story in there, the power in there, is that what they were doing was so desecrating that the rain, which is this purifying thing, wouldn't cleanse the ground. That they had stepped into the role of the Seville family house and the noble house, and basically switched positions, which is unfortunately common. The oppressed become oppressors all the time. Like you always have to watch yourself when you get a little bit of power. What do you do with it? And that night they switched. I mean, these people who had been oppressed and essentially enslaved and then tormented by members of their families and stuff going missing, they had when that shoe was on the other foot and the role reversed, they became bloodthirsty and awful. And so it's meant to serve as this kind of myth that when you go so far in your vengeance and when you get the power turned back to, like when you're given the reins to power, there's still wrong you can do. That simply suddenly being given power doesn't mean that you're right. It just means that you have the power and your actions matter all the more. Whereas when you're oppressed, your actions almost don't matter, and it's because you have no freedom, which sucks. But that rain not falling on the ground is meant to signify that even nature would not agree and flow in its natural course because of the amount of wrong that was being done. And nature almost, like, Seville Manor is full of evil people, and so nature doesn't expect them to do anything different because they're just awful people. Whereas these residents, the serfs, the citizens, the Pantheonians in the area who had been working there and who were oppressed, the rain expected better of them. Like, don't just turn around and become the new Seville Manor and the Seville nobles. So that's what that was about there.
Very cool. And his last question is: the lore speaks about a request from the Galdassi giants to the halflings. The giants wanted the halflings to neglect the Galdassi throne, deny the Galdassi heir. Can you elaborate on this?
Nope.
Didn't think so, but I figured I'd ask anyway. All right. Well, I feel like Derek got enough of his questions answered.
He did.
Yeah. Okay. Couple more, and then we'll let you go, and or if there's any questions from the chat. Although somebody does bring up a good point, real quick. They were saying if they're a Pantheon newbie and they were trying to find all the lore, where could they find it? And I really feel like we need to do something with the website with collecting all the stuff that we've had in the newsletters. So I will bring that up with the team, and I know there's some talk of it, so we'll figure that out for sure. Semi wants to know, and so we've answered this question kind of before, but I want to hear your take on it. Are there any plans for any epic legendary lore quest lines?
Yes, that is not my mind to say as far as deciding what gets that. But I mean, going to the signature characters, at least 2 of them have had weapons mentioned of significance. Dothane and Arakamel, and I don't think there's anyone else that's had anything mentioned. But yeah, no, that too is meant to be kind of a representation of players and characters, that there will be significant weapons that you can achieve and get. And I mean, that's even when we were working on perception and just tasks and anything quest related in general, how those are going to be done has been part of the conversation from the very beginning.
Right on. And by the way, there is a lot of canon lore on the website. If you go to the page that has the map on it, there's all the stuff about all the different errors and stuff. But we'll get some more stuff. I know you and I had talked about a while back about doing the what was the Fireside? What was that series called?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Fireside Chat.
Yeah, Fireside Chat.
It wasn't Fireside Chat. No, it was Tales from the Fire.
Tales from the Fire.
Tales from the Fire.
It's late.
It was yours.
I don't remember.
Wasn't it? You came up with it. Yeah.
No,
I don't remember.
I don't think I came up with. Was it?
Oh, okay. I don't know.
All right. Last question, and then you're free to go or hang around and chat with these fine fellas.
We'll hang around. We'll hang around a little bit more, but go ahead.
All right. This will be the last recorded question. Kumu wants to know, is the Keeper a bard? He's asking for a friend.
I mean, I know who Kumu is asking for.
I don't know who Kumu is asking for.
You don't know? Kumu is asking for Kumu.
I thought there was somebody else.
Kumu's Abby's changed. Kumu's a Lego bard, right?
Oh, is he? Oh.
Yes, and I don't remember everybody's Abby. Come on, guys. But I do remember Kumu's because I love Lego.
You lost me there.
So, the is the Keeper a bard? I mean, yes and no, I guess. That's the most accurate. Yes and no.
There you go. Yes and no. All right. Jan, thank you so much. Like you said, you hang around a little bit and hang out with these guys. Keeping of Castings, that was the good one. Thanks again. I know we were a couple months out from when we were originally scheduled, but well worth the wait in my opinion. You did not disappoint. So thanks. Anything you want to say to the community at large before we let you stop this recording?
I think I've said a lot already. So appreciate you all. Appreciate your patience, your long suffering. Appreciate your questions, your feedback, your criticisms, your compliments, all of that. Onward and upward as always, and really genuinely thank you all so much.
All right, everybody. We'll hopefully catch you next week on our live dev stream with Minus and myself. We're going to be looking at some of the stuff the art department is working on. It's pretty exciting. Catch you guys later. Take care.
Yeah.
Bring out your Daves. Bring out your Daves. Bring out your Daves.